Then visualize a complete blackness. Complete blackness. And the last stage of life is the clear light. And the comparison is the morning of the autumn and the clear morning of the autumn. A clear morning. And this is the final stage of a life. Just meditate on this clarity. Okay, now let's take 3 rounds of deep breathing. And you can slowly release your posture. So when you were going through those visualization, did you feel yourself kind of tightened up? Well, it's either that would mean there's not too much attachment to life, or the visualization process was a little bit not up to the mark. But when you visualize this, you have to visualize yourself going through it. That you are going, not that we are watching something over there and we are watching it. Then, it should be yourself visualization. Yeah. So when that happens, when let's say if you do it quite regularly, then the fear of death. The death is not going away, right? But the fear of death, which has no constructive use to that, which undermines us, right? Which makes us totally unprepared for death when it comes. The fear of death makes us not to think about death, right? And when we don't think about that, then we are completely unprepared when it comes, right? So when we do these kind of meditations quite regularly, right? So at least we are familiar with the process of death, right? So that fear, it might not go away completely, but it will be minimized to a large extent, right? Then we can embrace that eventuality. Yeah. And by embracing that eventuality, it will also make a difference to our life, how we live, right? And to make the most when we are living, right? When we say make the most, means not to make merry, yeah, not to make merry or do fun things, but if possible, not harm others, right? And if that's not possible, then at least not to, if possible, not harm others, then if one can go forward, then to be of help to others, right? Yeah, and at least not to harm others. Yeah, because there's only a tiny span of time that we are living, and it should be lived for more constructive ends, right? Yeah, so this is the death meditation. Any questions? Maybe after that, there's no questions to be asked. Yeah.
You described the feelings that we should have if we're meditating the right way. We should be afraid. We should feel attached to life. And as we get more familiar those negative emotions subside. But then do we see the increase of some positive emotions, and what would those emotions be?
Well, I think if your emotions are realistic, then that's positive in itself. Yeah. So what we have to do is we have to attune our thinking to the reality, right? Not to have an unrealistic expectation of life, right? So when that is minimized, when our thinking process is very much aligned with reality, then it's constructive, then it's positive. Positive in a sense that it might give you a feeling of joy or high feeling of joy or happiness that very moment, but positive in a sense that it's constructive, right? Because what we end up is we always act upon what we think, right? So when our thinking is unrealistic, then we will also act unrealistic, right? So when our thinking is more attuned to the reality, so our act of verbal or physical act will be more realistic. Yeah. But I think to minimize the fear of death, right, is not to be entirely mindful of death, or unmindful, right? People who neglect their health and they are not mindful of their death, right? They say I don't care kind of attitude, right? But when we say be mindful of the death, means to value whatever the time we have in this life and to channelize it towards more constructive ends. Yeah, that is the purpose, right? Even the people who blow themselves up, right? Yeah, who blow themselves up, they have no fear of death, right? Isn't it? They blow themselves up, right? These, suicide bombers, right? They have no fear of death. Not having fear of death is not very constructive, right? But what comes after that, what it inspires to, that is the most critical thing, right? The motivation, right? Why should we think about death? Why drive us towards thinking about death, right? The motivation is important, right? And then towards what's the end, we are thinking about death, That's also important too. Just not having a fear of death, it can be very destructive too sometimes, yeah. Yeah. Yes?
Not every theology suggests that there's multiple lives. So how do you think that changes your view of life as you go through this process?
Well, actually, what happens, when the near-death experiences are documented, right? They are not just documented from the Buddhist. They are documented from all different people, all different spiritual background, right? So these type of appearances, right? Especially the clear light towards the end, it's very clear in many cases where people, when they are revived, they say that they have that very strong image of a kind of very clear kind of tunnel. So this might be appearance of the clear light. So they might have kind of bounced back from that, reaching that stage and kind of bounce back. So all those having a different experiences itself might not, well, from the Buddhist perspective, we can use this account to prove that there's afterlife, right? But then people from different background can very much practice those visualization without, undermining one's own faith, right? But what it proves is that there's certain entity called consciousness apart from the brain, Right now, it's very much limited. The scientific view is very much limited to the brain cells, right? The fact that there are people still not having a sign of death, right? And without breathing, being declared medically dead, right? Brain dead, but still not having all those death-related signs like rigor mortis, shows that there has something which has to keep that person in that state, right? So in Buddhism, we call it the consciousness. Yeah, the death is only when the consciousness departs from the body, right? So as long as consciousness is in the body, that person is alive. So that person might not be breathing, but that person is alive. This is the Buddhist point of view, and this can be the view of the other from the other faiths too, you know. But I don't know what kind of scientific explanation can be brought into to explain this kind of phenomena. Yeah. Yes.
How do you recommend to do visualization or meditation when a person is dying or when they are dying?
No, I think this type of meditation should be done when it's very much alive. Yeah, because as I said earlier, the main focus of this meditation is to bring down the fear of death, to minimize the fear of death, right? Because when those signs actually comes in, then because one has already gone through this type of signs when one is alive, so there's greater degree of familiarity to that. So when we are familiar with things, we are not fearful, right? It works out that way in our life, right? When we in a familiar setting, then there's less of a fear, right? So when we are in an unknown place, then there's a lot of fear of unknown, that what might happen, what is this, what is that. So when there's familiarity, it brings us a sense of security, right? Familiarity brings a sense of security, and that sense of security kind of brings down a sense of fear.
And how can they help a person who is dying?
Well, when the person who is dying, as I said, there will be a certain physical signs, external signs, like the body limbs going weak, you know, losing one's shine, ears kind of, the water in the eye sockets kind of drying up, or the outgoing breath becomes more labor than the incoming breath. No, the incoming breath becomes more labor than the outgoing breath. So these are very telltale signs that the person is kind of moving towards the end. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned the passing of your master
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that his body
Mm-hmm.
maintained signs of life,
Mhm.
didn't deteriorate
Mhm.
by days
Mhm.
and you mentioned testing,
Mhm. Mhm.
scientific
Mhm.
testing. What year was that, and did any of the tests involve determining whether he was still conscious?
I didn't got your last part of the question.
The testing,
Uh-huh.
did any of the signs
Uh-huh.
determine whether or not he was still conscious?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You mentioned he was still warm,
Yep.
but what about consciousness?
Well, so the Buddhism point of view is that at that level, it is the last stage of the consciousness, right? The consciousness is very subtle. It's not a gross level consciousness, but still is very subtle, and because that subtle consciousness exists in that body can be classified as alive. Yeah, and which I think it was in 2009. Yeah. Yes, is that?
Some friends in Kathmandu when I was there, they were after Tuparujan
Mm-hmm.
died, and he was declared, like we call it dead. He was sitting in meditation, and they went up, walked up to Marigopa, and looked in the window. He had done this.
I've never seen that kind of response from the body, but the body being able to maintain its freshness and its pristineness, that is on more than a few occasions in the monastery. Yeah. Yes.
So at these end stages, how does both pain and medication affect our
Yeah.
awareness?
Yeah, so that's why at the end stages, like when the breathing has stopped, then the body no longer feels the pain, right? From the red appearance, the body has no feeling, no physical feeling to it. Yeah, but it's believed in our tradition that when the person, when this person is kind of numbed, at this high level of painkiller, this person numbed, then it can be an obstacle to the, meditation. Yeah. So our belief is that when towards the end, it's better not to give a high dosage of morphine or whatever, so that if that person is kind of familiar with that meditation, then those meditations will come much clearer to the person. Yeah. So when the breathing has stopped, then the physical feeling has stopped already. Yeah. Yes.
Would you say that a person's emotional and mental suffering in this life can be alleviated by this process due to recognizing that suffering is also impermanent?
Yes. A lot of things, sufferings in our life, is very much comes from a sense of this not being content, right? Being greed, right? That so when we go through the stimulated death process, we are more conscious of our death, or more conscious of our ever-changing existence, right? So then that will in turn will temper our urge to need things, Yeah, our urge to exert our selfishness. Yeah. So it will kind of moderate our want. It will temper our want, So that way, it will cast entirely a new light in on our life. Our life will appear in entirely different light. Yes? Yeah?
You had mentioned the 3 channels,
Uh-huh.
and at the very end of life, that the 2 channels unknot themselves from the central channel. Is any of that part of the meditation on death, or not?
No, the part of the meditation is mostly through visualization. But when it comes to the advanced tantric meditation, then you have to visualize those with the loosening up of those channels. Yeah, but basic dying meditation is just to go with those visualization, right? And the key is, just as I said earlier, not to imagine one is seeing those things, but actually experiencing, more subjective experience than objective experience. Yeah.
So one would want to be very careful not doing that unraveling until
Yeah.
the proper training.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to thank you for your meditation and not making us get in coffee so close to the top.
Connecting the 2 lights inside and then leaving the body.
Well, the leaving the body is, that is the stage which comes after the death, right? When the consciousness departs from the body, then there is the intermediate state which gets started. Yeah. Yes?
Does that have to do with waiting 3 days?
Sorry?
Waiting 3 days after the last breath? Waiting for the consciousness to make sure it's left the body?
Yeah.
Well, not to cremate the body.
Yeah. So in the Buddhist, we don't cremate the body for 3 days. Yeah, because we believe that, our belief is that as long as the consciousness is in the body, then if cremate, then it amounts to killing a person. Yeah, so the body, unless there's some compelling reasons, we don't cremate the body, at least for 24 hours. Yeah. Okay. It's 12. I think. Oh, okay. So one thing is, what happened was last night I was not very well. Yeah, I think it was just clash of climate. I came from California just a day before, and it was all sunny and warm out there. And all of a sudden I found myself in snow. So there kind of seems to be a clash of temperature. So Yeah, so last night I couldn't sleep that well and has to make a few rounds to the toilet. Yeah, so right now, yeah, so my energy is kind of a little bit low. So if I kind of come across a little bit incoherent, I apologize for that.
Well, I'd like to paraphrase Stephen Jobs in his last words, which were, wow. The monks will now take a little bit of a break. We've been asked by the husband of a very dear friend of Marcia and I's, Barbara Summerfield, who was interned in the back by the fence over there about 2 months ago. Barbara Summerfield, who was truly a spiritual pioneer, and we had known her for over 40 years. Barbara was the first person to publish Thich Nhat Hanh here in the United States. She's published Elizabeth Haight, and really changed many, many people's look into the spiritual process itself. So the monks are going to go and perform a little service at her internment at the request of her husband. So if you want to stick around, that would be wonderful, or go to lunch. We're going to restart around 2 o'clock. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Rinpoche. What a profound teaching.
My daughter is married here too.
Really? Okay.